Welcome to the Mississippi Arts Hour. I'm Diane Williams, the host for today's show. Each week, we talk with people from around the state who are involved creatively with art, music, crafts, literature, festivals, and cultural events. Today, I'll be talking with an artist that works with original smoked-fired clay pottery. They call her the Clay Lady, and her name is Rachel Ballentine.
I signed up for the class. She showed us a video of these Nigerian women making these beautiful pots by hand. As I watched those ladies' hand, my hand became theirs. And just before the video ended, I heard a voice. It said, "Go dig the clay." And when the video ended, I stood up in front of all of these people and I said, I know what I'm supposed to be doing for the rest of my life. I know.
We'll be back right after this. I think everyone has played with clay. Well, I know I have. As a little girl, I used to love to play with clay, and I still do like to get my fingers into the clay and mix it around. But you have some potters in the state of Mississippi that are incredible. And at the Arts Commission, we get to experience sitting and watching them do their work. And I have had an opportunity to watch Rachel Ballentine at work. She is from Sardis, Mississippi, which is North Mississippi, and she does original smoke-fired clay pottery. And some of her work includes water vessels, storage vessels, wedding vessels, all kinds of vessels and pinched pots and long-necked jars and so many different things, too numerous to name. But she uses the Mother Earth. She finds her tools or her equipment out in the yards and the gardens, and I'm going to let her tell you all about it. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Diane.
And, first of all, we like to know who you are and where you're from. Are you from Mississippi?
I am truly from Mississippi. I was born and raised in Sardis, Mississippi, went to school there, went to Ole Miss there and graduated from Ole Miss and went into the military. I'm Ole Miss first ROTC graduate, female graduate. And I gave Uncle Sam 12 years of my time. And I have come back to Mississippi to give back to the state and to my family and to the school system.
I hear you've got a couple of master's degrees. You didn't just go to Ole Miss. You kind of kept going to school for a couple of other things. So tell me about your matriculation through college.
Okay. As a military member and as an officer, I had to have a master's degree in order to get my promotion. But when I moved back to Mississippi in 1992, I had a master's, but because it wasn't in education, Mississippi and the state of Tennessee would not pay me at a master's level. So I decided in 1997 to go back to school to get my master's in elementary education. And along the way, I accidentally fell over into the art field. In 98, I was supposed to have graduated with a master's, but I came up 3 hours short. So my advisor said, "Why don't you take an art class?" I said, "Art? I don't know anything about art." But I took her advice and I went back over to the art department, just knowing that they were going to turn me down. But I don't know why, but I ended up in beginning ceramic. The first class, it was terrible. Everything that I made was heavy duty. But my family collected my work.
Oh.
But my instructor asked me, "Are you going to take me again?" And I couldn't tell him no. And I said, "Yes." So in that second class, I became addicted to the clay. I couldn't breathe. My family at home, I have a daughter who's disabled. Her name is Sophia. And I would tell them, "Keep Sophia 4 hours and I'll be back." It's 4 o'clock at night. 10 o'clock at night. And I said, "But I can make one more pot. I can make one more pot before I go home." And that's how I got involved in my third master's, because the chairperson said, why don't you stay and get a master's in art education and you can teach art? So that's how this all began.
So I'm sure they use this packaged clay. Am I correct? Or
Oh, yes, they use processed clay. But in that second class, I told you I became addicted to the clay. I had this dream about this bowl, and the bowl had buttons down on the side. So in that second class, I couldn't stop making bowls. I just made these bowls, and my instructor would see me there at 7 o'clock in the morning. And when he leave, I'm still there. When he come back the next day, he said, did you go home? I said, yeah, I went home. But I couldn't. I had to be there. At the end of the semester, where they critique your work, and we had to bring out all of our work. Well, 3 of my classmates had an 8-foot table where they had put all of their work. I had to have a whole 8-foot table by myself. And my professor said, ooh, you've been working. And I told you, I became addicted to this stuff. But a friend of mine, she said, Rachel, you need to go to the art colony. I said, what is an art colony? She says, down at Tougaloo. So I talked to the chairperson over the art department, and we looked it up online. Just so happens the lady that was teaching the clay class had gone to Africa in 1972, and she was teaching her hand building. I didn't know anything about hand building, but I signed up for the class. When I got there, everyone had portfolios, books full of their slides. I had 10 slides. And there weren't no way that I'm going to show these 10 slides. And I didn't. But I told my instructor, I said, I am a truly lefty. And people say, you can't teach left-handed people. And she said, not to worry, not to worry. And she said, it's okay. But that Thursday, she showed us a video of these Nigerian women making these beautiful pots by hand. As I watched those ladies' hand, my hand became theirs. And just before the video ended, I heard a voice. It said, go dig the clay, and you stay as close to nature to what you put on the outside of the vessel. And when the video ended, I stood up in front of all of these people and I said, I know what I'm supposed to be doing for the rest of my life. I know. They were looking at me real strange, moving away from me. But I kept telling them, I know what I'm supposed to be doing. Well, when that week was over, I went back home, went back over to Ole Miss, and I told my pottery instructor, I said, I know what I want to do for my graduate show. I know. And I said, but I have to dig my own clay. Well, we had always used processed clay in the studio. And he turned to me, he said, go forward. That's when I realized I did not know where there was clay in the ground. And I said, oh, my shucks, I have gotten myself in trouble again. But I thought about it. And I said, Pop, my dad used to work for the county. And I went to him. And he took me to a man that owned a gravel pit.
You're listening to the voice of Rachel Ballentine. We call her the Clay Lady. This is the Mississippi Arts Hour on MPB Radio. And tell me a little more about your dad and what he did.
Well, Pop worked for the county, and I knew he probably knew where there was clay. So I went to him, and I said, Pop, where can I find clay in the ground? And he thought about it. He said, come down here tomorrow. And I went down to the house, and he took me to this man that owned a gravel pit. He went in and talked to the guy, and when he came out, he begged for me to follow him down off into this gravel pit. And he pointed toward this mound and drove away and left me. And I said, oh. I got out with my bucket, and I'm looking at this mound and said, that doesn't look like clay. But as I got closer, I could see the clay chips. And I started gathering these chips, and I started walking around this mound. But as I walked around the mound, I don't know why, but I just started chanting, you know, all these clay chips, you know, and all at once, this golden glow came over me. It didn't scare me, but when it went away, I said, I know what I'm supposed to be doing for the rest of my life. And I gathered those chips, and I brought the clay back to school. We had a visiting artist. He said, let's test this clay that you have gathered from the ground. And we tested it and fired it and found out that I was working with natural porcelain. I started making these vessels I had no idea that I could make. Every morning just before I wake up, I will see a picture. It was just like someone flashed the camera, and I would see this vision piece. Well, I'm a divorcee, and my husband is my sketchbook. So it stays in the bed with me. So when I see those pieces, I would flip over and sketch the piece out. So when I go to school, I'm trying to create these pieces, but the clay in my hand would not let me create these pieces. So I was a little frustrated. But this other friend of mine, she told me, she said, don't worry. What you're doing now, you're creating the offspring. In time, you will come back and create those visual pieces that you had seen in your dream. And I didn't even realize. It was about a year later when I looked back in my sketchbook, I had started creating these pieces. But I'm telling you all, when I sit down with this ball of clay, first I have to get permission from my daughter. And I said, Sophia, let me work for 4 hours. And I'm sitting there working. And when I sit down, it's like I go into a zone. I could feel things moving away from me, and it allowed me to create. And when I finish creating, I can feel everything coming back into place. And I know then the piece is finished. But there are times when I don't listen to the clay. And I have created accident. And I had to learn from that. I remember I was working on a piece and I was trying to make it lighter. And I was shaving the clay down. And the piece said, enough. And I said, oh no, let me go around one more time. And when I started around on the piece, I punched a hole in it. I said, oh my goodness, it told me what to do. And I didn't listen. One more time. I had created this piece. That morning when I got up, it looked like a doll. And the piece said, take me to the bisque room. And I said, I need to go by the glaze room. Because my professor had taught us how to make terrace sedge, which is a liquid clay that you spray on your piece to make it smoother. And I said, I want to spray terrace sedge on this. And I went into the room to make this piece. And I said, oh no, I got to wait.
We'll talk a little bit more, Rachel Ballentine, Miss Clay Lady, but we're going to listen to the Delta Blues Music Band from Clarksdale to Kansas City, Volume 1, and this selection is Every Day I Have the Blues. Welcome back. I'm Diane Williams, and I usually work at the Mississippi Arts Commission. We do this weekly show here on the Mississippi Arts Hour on MPB. And my guest today is the Clay Lady, and I'm just thoroughly enjoying her storytelling. So I guess you, Rachel, you learned the history of and all of the wherewithals on how to put clay together. So by the time you started digging in the earth looking for clay, you knew how it would work together and what you needed to do. You knew the consistency, or did you spend a lot of time through trial and error? Tell me about that, the process of growth.
Well, I have to tell you, in the beginning, when I gathered the clay, you go through the process of wedging. And when I wedged the clay, I remember as a child, my mom making biscuits. And that's how I feel like when I'm wedging the clay. That's the process I'm going through. But when I wedge the clay, I can feel. And again, the clay is talking to me. It's telling me, you know, how much sand to add to the clay, how much water to add to the clay. And when I do that and wedge, and again, it'll tell me enough. And I will gather this clay and put it in plastic bags to let it sit. And I find that when the clay sits between 3 and 6 months, the clay works so well. And again, in that first gravel pit, the clay that I was using, that porcelain clay, it was so silky. Oh, it just, when you put it in your hand and your hand in the clay is telling you how to form that piece, and you bring that piece up, and when it's finished, you know that you have put your whole soul in the piece. That's why I found it very hard when I had my first show, that I knew when people would look at my work, they would see my soul. And I did not want people to see my soul, because they will see all of my strength and all of my weakness. And it's like I had to, what could I do to save, to cover myself? But I wanted my work to be out there. And I created these pieces again because the clay and the hands, it just worked together. First, I didn't even understand this. I didn't understand. How could I be creating these pieces? But again, I talked to some of my artist friends who have gone through the school and learned techniques and everything. They assured me, it's okay. You're not crazy. The clay does talk to you. And that really gave me some relief, because I said, how could this be happening? But one reason, I know why this all came together. As I mentioned earlier, I have a disabled child. And I wanted my Sophia to be close to me. And I said a prayer. I said, please, God, give me something that I can do and that Sophia can sit and watch me. And that's why when I heard that voice, when it told me to go dig the clay, I didn't question it. I just went and did what it told me to do, not knowing, not having the ability to be able to know what clay was all about, how to create these vessels. People ask me, how do you do that? I said, I was given a gift. I heard a voice and it told me what to do. And I said, when I sit down to form a piece, the first time that it happened, when I touched that clay, a force came over my hand and it scared me. And I jerked my hand back and I felt that force pull back. But when I put my hand back down on the clay, I felt that it was there for a reason. And when I accepted that, that's when I began to create these pieces. I had no idea that I could create, because I would get up in the morning time and I would look, did I do that? And I said, I must have. Sophia didn't do that. And then I would take these pieces to work, to school, and I would show them to my pottery instructor, and he said, did you do that? I said, yes, I did that. He said, okay, I want you to create another one. I want it bigger and I want it lighter. So I go back home and I create another piece. In a week, I bring it to him. Again, he said, "Did you do that?" I said, "Yes, I did that." They couldn't believe that I was creating these pieces because around this time, the chairperson had convinced me to continue to go to school and get my master's in art education. Well, I had to take other medium, drawing, painting, watercolor. I was terrible in those medium. I was terrible. But I could do that pottery. And because I wasn't a studio person, I didn't have studio space. So the chairperson said, "Oh, just put your work in my office." By this time, I am totally addicted to this stuff. I filled the floor up. I filled her empty shelves up. And one day, my watercolor instructor came into her office, and she looked and she saw all this pottery. And she says, "Whose work is this?" She says, "Rachel Ballentine." "Rachel?" She said, "Rachel Ballentine." Rachel! She could not believe that I was doing this because I was so terrible in watercolor. She could not. But I could do that pottery. I could do that.
You're listening to the Mississippi Arts Hour, and I'm just enjoying listening to this storyteller. I don't know that you knew you. Did you know you were a storyteller?
No, a few people have told me.
Yeah.
They say I should go in that way.
This is MPB Radio, and we're talking with the clay lady, Rachel Ballentine. So all of your work is done by hand. Do you ever use a wheel at all?
Oh, no. Oh, no. I have to touch this clay. As I said, when I go into the gravel pit, and now I go into creek and gather clay, when I touch the clay, oh, you got to touch it. And to be able to bring all this back. And as I travel, I can spot it. When I'm traveling down the interstate, oh, it's a, "Hey, Rachel, I'm over here." And hey, my mom said, "Girl, you crazy. You stop and ask anybody for something." I said, "If you want something, you have to stop and ask." And I'll stop and say, "Who owned this?" And I said, "Can I have some of that?" And they allow me to have it. So when you gather this material, and sometimes when I go in a gravel pit, oh, the colors. Oh, man. Oh, no, you got purple clay. You got maroon clay. You got this blue clay. And the owner say, "Well, which one you want?" And I'm saying, I am like a child in a candy store. Can I have some? All of it. And they just look at me and say, "Okay, help yourself." But the thing is, because of OSHA now, you're not allowed to drive into these places. You have to use a wheelbarrow. And I tell you, that's why I say, when I travel down the interstate, I carry my wheelbarrow, my hoe, and a shovel. Because I know when I see that and it's waving at me, I know that I must stop and get some. I'm telling you. And it's like when I go out, I live on a farm, so when I go out into the pasture, nature is talking to me. And it say, "Try me." You know, I try the berries, the wild, we call them possum grapes. And I gather the grapes. And I gather, it's like anything that could burn. And I gather this material. And when I create my vessels, and I take them from the bisque, and I smoke fire them. That's when I put them in this big drum barrel, and I throw in sawdust. I throw in cat food. I throw in another thing that I use, and I didn't want to tell people that I was using this stuff. So I got up early one Saturday morning, went up to my brother's place because they have cows. And I went out in the pasture and I started collecting dry cow chips. And my mom always said, I don't care what you do, somebody's going to see you. So guess who came up to check on his cows? My dad. And I saw him, and he stopped and looked at me, but he drove on through the pasture and checked on his cows. And when he came back through, I was still walking through the pasture, collecting dry cow chips. So he drove out to me. He said, what are you doing? I said, Pop, I got to have this for my clay. I got to have it. He said, okay. He drove on. And I gathered this dry cow chips. I also gathered horse chips. Well, when I got up to the barn, I said, where can I store these dry cow chips? Well, there was this feed trough. I said, ooh, I can put my chips right in here. Well, I have a twin brother, and he came home, and he was helping Pop out in the lot. And he looked at this feed trough, and it was full of cow chips. And he told me, he said, how in the world did Pop get the cows to do this? Not knowing it was me that had put the cow chips there. And when he saw me, I said, Ray, don't mess with my stuff. So my family, they are learning too. When Rachel have piles of stuff somewhere around the house, just leave it alone because she's going to use that on her pottery in some kind of way.
Rachel, you leave me speechless. We're going to listen to a little bit more music. Since you live in North Mississippi, it's a good thing to listen to the Delta Blues Museum's band, where young kids have an opportunity to work with professional musicians. This selection is one that we know from Bill Withers, one of his songs, No Sunshine. Welcome back. This is the Mississippi Arts Hour on MPB Radio. My guest today is the Clay Lady. I don't even think we need to know her actual name because it's all about the clay. I do have one question for you, Rachel. I saw you at Tougaloo Art Colony last year in 2010 during the summer months, and it's a week-long colony. And there was a woman there that was teaching a class, teaching some concepts about working with clay, and it was different from anything I'd ever seen, and you seem to have taken to it. And I'll let you tell us about that technique that you learned and give us a visual of what that was like.
Okay. I think the person that was there was Winnie Hart Orns, and she's the lady that had taught me before. But what she does, she teaches people how to make these rounded bottom vessels, and she teaches how to make a rapier ring that the piece sit on. And I have used that technique, but I have taken it a little farther than that because I am always looking for other things for my vessels to sit on. And one of the times that, again, at home, walking around in the pasture, and I noticed under this tree was this wagon that had rotted, but it had these beautiful metal rings. I said, ooh, I can use that. So I asked my dad, Pop, can I have these rings? He said, oh, yep, you can have those. So I am always looking for things to use. As I say, I use things from nature to create the outside of my vessel because I don't use a glaze. Everything is from nature. So as I go through the wood, or even when I come downtown, when I go into a hardware store, people they will say, how can I help you? I said, when I find it, I'll tell you. So I am always looking for things to help me to create my vessels, either to make them smoother or put rough texture on them. So between nature and things that you can buy, that's how I create the outside of the vessels. But again, using the cow manure or the house or the horse manure, that's where you create the blackness. That's where it comes from. I also use what they call horse apples. And the horse apples, when it burns against a vessel, you put the horse apple and the cow manure on top of each other. Well, the horse apples have a milky substance that flows when they get hot. Well, when it flows and the cow manure is there, it turns it black, and it creates these beautiful designs on the vessels. I cannot believe the things that are there on these vessels, because now the vessels, when I pull them out of the ash, they have faces of people. They have, it's like a picture of animals. And I am amazed. I tell you, I had created a series of pieces, and I was using a very light clay. And as I say, the clay talks to me. It tells me what to do. And I had created these vessels, and they said, "We're not finished." And I said, what can I put on this? And the little boy said, "We need something black." And I thought about a black glaze. I said, "No, that's commercial. That's commercial." So I put those pieces back into the drum barrel, and I threw in that cow manure and the sawdust. And when those pieces finished burning, and I pulled them out of the ash one at a time, each one of those pieces had it's like someone threw a piece of blackness on them. I mean, I could not believe that it came out that way. And I mean, I had to scream, because it's like, oh, wow. And I'm telling you guys, when I sit down to create, it is such a great feeling that I feel. I can't believe how happy that I can be doing something I truly love doing. I'm telling you, I can feel it from the sole of my feet to the crown of my head. Sometimes when I'm working, I have to cry, because I can't believe I'm so happy, creating these vessels. And my Sophia is sitting there watching me. But sometimes she'll say, "It's time for me." She'll make a noise to let me know, "Okay, I've given you this time. It's time for me now." But as I go and work this clay, now people have asked me to come to do workshop. I love working with children. I think art is so, so important that we need this in the school. Since I've been on this journey for, I think it's 12 years now, I have been selected to the Craftsman's Guild. I am also a member of the Mississippi Artist Roster. I have been called upon to do commission work. This past year, I have worked with the MAAE, Mississippi Art, or Mississippi
Alliance
for the Art Education. And I created their vessels for their awardees for that. And also, now I have created a piece. I was asked to create a piece, and I read the book, The Help, and I created 2 pieces. And I could not believe, first, because I had never heard of the book, The Help. And I got a call from Greenwood, an art gallery there, And they said, could you read the book and get inspired and create a piece of art? I said, sure. Whenever someone asks me to create something in a special way, I always, I have to sit back and look and think, and I have to say a prayer and ask God for his guidance to help create these pieces. First, after I read the book, I created this maid, and it was more of a figure shape. And it was a child standing by her knee, and she was holding one child to her chest. And the child to her chest was the white child. The child down by her knee was her child. And when you looked into that child's eyes, you could see teardrop. But I said, no, that's not quite me. I want people to see what I'm creating. And when they see the piece, they say, oh, that's Rachel's. That's Rachel. Or as they say, that's the clay lady. Well, I knew it was about these maids. And what I did, I went back to the clay. And I'm telling you guys, that clay, it talks to me. And I start forming this piece. And it came up more like a female. And I'm trying to think, how can I show the uniform? And the little voice say, use their words. And I carved their words into the piece. And I put a white glaze in there to represent the white uniform. And then I looked at the face. And I cut half the face off and turned it backwards. Because these ladies, when they went into these homes, they couldn't be true. So they wore a mask. And that's what that turned piece represent, the mask. So when you saw the work, if you read the book, you know which maid it was. So that's how I created that piece. But I am always on this journey. And it always leads me back to children.
This is the Mississippi Arts Hour on MPB Radio. Rachel, I was looking at your website this morning, and one of the things I noticed was that particular piece I believe that you're referring to. Mm-hmm. And somehow, amazingly enough, I thought of The Help. And I was trying to read some of the writing, and it said, you kind, you important. And then I read something that said secret stories. So I really think you achieved what you were trying to achieve in creating that piece.
Thank you. Thank you. Again, when I'm working with children, I want them to experience what I go through. And that's why I like to use the natural clay. In one group, I have taken them to the creek. Whether we gather the clay, whether we gather the stones and the sand, everything that I need to use, I gather in that same area. And we brought it back. The children, they put on a clay mask. They created these pieces, and they understand the process. When you dig this clay, and like I say, it is Mother Earth that you're using. But I've worked with the Mississippi Art Commission as a field advisor. I have done demonstration at the Craftsman's Guild. I'm a member and was a board member. My thing is that when I create these vessels and when I work with children, I want them to feel a part of this. When I go out and do workshop and you use a natural clay, that means that you have to work in a hurry. And this past summer, we was working and everyone know how hot it was. And they was praying that it would cool down. Well, I was praying that it stay hot because it allowed the pieces to dry and we were able to fire them and glaze them. And in a week's time, in 5 days, we were able to give the children their pieces back that they had created. So I like that people like to touch my work. They like to feel it. And each year I go to the Chimneyville Festival, and in my booth, I invite people in and say, come and listen, because you have to listen to my vessels. You have to hear what they're saying. Some people say, what? I said, come listen. Put it to your ear. And they said, how do you do that? I said, it's from the earth. And I love when I call them little people, when they come and they listen to a large piece. And when they put their ear down, they go, ooh, because they are totally amazed at the sound that come from there. And people tell me different sounds that they hear. And some people say, I don't mean to offend you, but sometimes it sounds like the commode running. I said, that's okay. It's what you hear. And it's what you see on the outside of the vessels. So come and hear and listen to the vessels.
You can visit Rachel Ballentine's website. It's rachelballentine.com, and that's RACHEL, B as in boy, ALLENTINE.com. On her website, you can read about her philosophy as it relates to her work as the clay lady, but also in retrospect to how this affects education. And if you've been listening to the show, you know she's also a little bit of a scientist, although she uses some very quaint ways of expressing that. She doesn't use the scientific terminology, but certainly she understands the earth, the textures, and all of those kinds of things. And she has a deep understanding about education for children. She says that on her website under philosophy that there are 3 types of learning styles: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. And she said that children, and she's quoted some different people like Edwards and Mercer and people like that. I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand. And so she has a strong desire to share her talents or share creativity with students because it is a tool, she says, that make children and adults think. So she's available as a teaching artist to come into schools and just sharing her gift as an artist. But then you also have that teaching perspective, Rachel, that teachers could benefit from as well when you go into the classroom. So you've got it. The website is really, the pictures on the website have such clarity and, you know, it's not foggy or anything like that. Mm-hmm. People could really get to see some of the things you have been talking about in your art and with your art today. And you have been listening to the Mississippi Arts Hour on MPB, and I'm Diane Williams. I'm the Arts Industry Director with the Mississippi Arts Commission. I'd like to thank the clay lady, Rachel Ballentine, for being here today. And if you'd like to experience seeing the clay lady's work, again, visit her website at rachelballentine.com. But you can also learn more about some of the organizations she's mentioned. The Mississippi Arts Commission has a visual arts directory, and you can also visit mscrafts.org for the Crafts Center. If you'd like to listen to this show again or share it with a friend, visit our website, arts.state.ms.us, where all episodes of the Arts Hour are available for download or listening online. The show is also available as a podcast through iTunes. Thank you for joining us on Mississippi Public Broadcast Radio.